The reading today is taken from Luke 6, verses 27 to 38. Love for enemies. But to you who are willing to listen, I say, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who hurt you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, offer the other cheek also. If someone demands your coat, offer your shirt also. Give to anyone who asks. And when things are taken away from you, don't try to get them back. Do to others as you would like them to do to you. If you love only those who love you, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good only to those who do good to you, why should you get credit? Even sinners do that much. And if you lend money only to those who can repay you, why should you get credit? Even sinners will lend to other sinners for a full return. Love your enemies. Do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to be repaid. Then your reward from heaven will be very great, and you will truly be acting as children of the Most High. For he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. You must be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn others, or it will come back against you. Forgive others, and you will be forgiven. Give, and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over and poured into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back. Amen. This is a beautiful passage, and it is such a privilege to be able to preach directly from the words of Jesus. Like so many of the instructions we see in the Bible, this message is quite clear and straightforward, but that does not mean it is easy to carry out. However, we will see that Jesus offers us some useful tools to help us fulfill those simple and yet difficult instructions. Verse 27 begins with Jesus calling all those present to listen. And if we look at the earlier parts of this chapter, we see that there was a large crowd of disciples and a great number of people from all over Judea, Jerusalem, and from the coastal regions around Tyre and Sidon. So this was a very large crowd of people. Now, I have worked with 2 to 4 year olds for many years, and when I wanted to tell them something important, I would say, have you got your listening ears with you today? And Jesus is calling the crowd to listen up, to pay attention, to concentrate, because he is about to say something significant, something important that they all need to hear and contemplate. So before he begins, he wants them to be ready to listen so they don't miss any of his message. So may I ask you, have you got your listening ears with you? Are you ready to hear from Jesus? Jesus goes on to say, love your enemies. Now in the Bible, there are 6 different words that all are translated into the one English word, love. When Jesus says, have love for your enemies, this Greek word agape that he uses does not mean romantic love or liking or even friendship. What agape means is a wholehearted, unreserved, unconditional desire for the well-being of another. We may not like or want to be friends with our enemies, but Jesus calls us to have a wholehearted, unreserved, unconditional desire for their well-being. Jesus goes on in verse 28 to give us 3 ways in which we can show agape love to our enemies. Firstly, do good. Do well. Do what is right, what is becoming, what is truly and justly honourable. As an example of this, I recently read an account of a prisoner who came to faith in Jesus and started a Bible study group in prison. Many of the prisoners joined the Bible study group. Another group of prisoners were unhappy about this new group and began to steal from them and make life difficult for them. The person who started up the Bible study group realised he had to take action. Now, within the culture of the prison, this would normally have meant retaliation that would then result in an escalation into violence. Now, the prisoner who had started the Bible study group knew that that wasn't the right way. So he prayed and came to this solution. He called both groups together. He told them that the stealing had to stop. He then said that the Bible study group would pool all their resources together, which, as they were prisoners, would not be very much. And he told the group that had been stealing from them that if they had a need, then the Bible study group would do all they could to meet that need. As a result of this display of agape love, many of the group who had been stealing joined the Bible study group and came to faith. And I thought this was a really good example of doing good to your enemies. Secondly, Jesus tells us to bless our enemies. How can we bless our enemies? We can decide to speak well of them, to praise them, confer favour on them. Many years ago, 2 friends who were part of our home group at the time were going through a really difficult time with their neighbours who were inconsiderate and made life very difficult for them. Our friends came to home group and asked for prayer. They specifically asked that their neighbours would be blessed, and I know that they regularly prayed that their neighbours would be richly blessed. Their neighbours were blessed with a job promotion, which also meant relocating to another part of the country. Third, pray. The third way Jesus tells us to show agape to our enemies is to pray for them. Jesus encourages us to lift our enemies in prayer, to petition God on their behalf. Just as the Christian prisoner prayed and our friends prayed for their difficult neighbours. Verse 29, Jesus says, turn the other cheek. When we read this verse, it is important to understand the context. About 18 months ago, our Thursday evening Bible study group went through the Bible course created by the Bible Society, and I believe the course is running at the moment on Tuesday evenings via Zoom, and I would highly recommend the course. One of the points the course emphasises is the importance of context when reading the Bible. As we look at this verse, we need to ask ourselves, who is the someone who has the authority to slap a person on the cheek? We need to remember that this was a time of occupation. The Romans were an occupying force. It is also a time of masters and slaves. Romans and masters had the right to strike those who were under their authority. So let me demonstrate. If I'm a Roman official and I find someone who's done something I don't approve of, I would strike them with the back of my right hand on their right cheek. Now, I would never use my left hand. In this culture, that wouldn't be acceptable. So I'd use my right hand. Now, if the person I've struck on the right cheek then turns their other cheek, the only way I can strike them with my right hand is to use my palm. And in this culture, that would be seen as shameful. Using my palm would be dishonouring to me. and some scholars see this as a display of non-violent resistance. Similarly, Romans could demand your outer garment, and by offering all your clothes, it could be seen as a way of shaming your enemy. Verse 30 calls us to be generous, which is at the very heart of Christianity. John and I are part of the Hearts of Love choir, and last Saturday the choir had its annual Love Day. As part of this, we went to the local shops at Chell's in Stevenage. We sang some songs outside, then we split into small groups, and with the permission of shopkeepers, we offered to pay for some people's shopping. As we did so, we explained who we were and what we want, and we wanted to share the love of Jesus with them. We called to be generous. Interestingly, quite a few people were reluctant to accept our generosity. I think they imagined there must be some kind of catch. When they realised that it was simply an agape gift of kindness, many were very touched. Verse 31 says, "Do to others as you would have them do to you." Now, God is so good. About a month ago, I was flicking through the channels on TV, trying to find something vaguely interesting to watch, when I came across Bobby Schuller preaching on the TBN channel. And he was preaching on this scripture. 4 weeks ago, I had no idea I would be preaching on this passage. So isn't God amazing? And I have Bobby Schuller to thank for helping me to a greater understanding of this verse. We need to go back to Old Testament times to fully understand the relevance of this verse. In Old Testament times, there were two prominent Jewish teachers, Shammai and Hillel, and a Gentile who was seeking to understand the Torah, that is the law, asked the first of these teachers to explain his faith simply. He asked him to summarise his faith while standing on one leg. Shammai was deeply offended and chased away the man with a hammer. Undeterred, the Gentile went to the second Jewish teacher, Hillel, and asked him the same thing. This teacher was also offended and thought the Gentile was showing disrespect. However, he agreed to summarise the Jewish laws while standing on one leg. His summary went like this: "Do not do to others what you do not want them to do to you." Now, this story would have been very familiar to the crowds Jesus was speaking to. They would have been very familiar with this rule, which is often referred to as the silver rule. Jesus is drawing on these Jewish traditions. He takes the silver rule, something the people would have heard many, many times before, and makes it better. So how does Jesus change the silver rule? Jesus changes the rule from "do not do to others what you do not want them to do to you" to "do to others what you would want them to do to you." Do to others. Do. Make a decision. Be proactive. It's a big shift from being a victim to being an agent. Just remember the account of the prisoner who ran the Bible study. By applying the golden rule, he was able to turn the situation around and show agape love to his enemies. He took action. He did something. Just imagine waking up each morning with the golden rule mentality and heart. This would mean we would be thinking and looking for ways to treat others the way we would want to be treated ourselves, actively looking for ways to have a positive impact on all those we come into contact with, from the members of our family to the stranger in the supermarket queue. A golden rule mindset means making a decision to do for others not necessarily what they deserve, but deciding to show kindness, understanding, and putting ourselves in the other person's position and thinking, what would I want if I were them? Jesus also reminds us to expect nothing in return. It is a shift from the way the world views things, the attitude that says, I give this only if you give me that, to I share this with you, knowing that you or someone else will generously share with me whatever I need. So we move on to verse 37. Do not judge. When Jesus says this, he's not saying that anything goes. This teaching is to warn us against stereotyping people who are different from us. It is a warning against the kind of judgment which puts labels on others. Now, by putting labels on others, we are in danger of removing their humanity, which can also then relieve us of the obligation to treat others as we would treat our friends and family. Throughout history, and sadly today, we see the terrible effects labelling and stereotyping has, causing division, animosity, and hatred. Jesus is teaching us to break down stereotypes and barriers we may put up, to distance ourselves from those who are different from us. The enemy, the stranger, the people who are just a bit different, those who make us feel uncomfortable. When we think of how Jesus treated the Samaritan woman, it gives us a great example of how to show agape love and not to label or stereotype. Jesus met this woman at the noontime, a time of day when most people would not be in a public place because of the heat of the day. He was also willing to spend time with a woman, which in his time and culture would not be seen as normal and acceptable. He was willing to spend time with her, and not only was she a woman, but she was a Samaritan, from another culture, a person that the Jewish people would normally look down upon. And also, she was a woman of poor reputation. Now, Jesus was not only willing to spend time with her, he showed her respect, kindness, and understanding. And his agape love completely transformed her life. Our Thursday evening Bible study group is currently studying the book of Ruth, a wonderful account of Ruth, a foreigner, a Moabite, an outsider. Ruth showed incredible loyalty and kindness to her mother-in-law Naomi. Her actions were eventually rewarded when she became the wife of Boaz, who accepted her without prejudice. God used Ruth, the outsider, and as we read the final chapter of Ruth, we discover her descendants were David, and through David's line, eventually Jesus himself. Jesus calls us to have agape love, which is a deep desire for the well-being of all others and to do all we can for their good. Verse 38 tells us, "Give and you will receive. Your gift will be returned to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over and poured into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back." Jesus is teaching here on the principle of sowing and reaping. Again, we need to think of the context of this verse. Imagine someone at this time going to the market to buy grain. They would use their outer garment as a container for the grain. The stallholder would fill the outer garment with grain, and the garment would then be shaken to make room for more, so that the buyer could get the absolute maximum amount of grain. If the stallholder was feeling generous, they might fill the garment to overflowing. And this is a wonderful image of God's generous and abundant love for us. He wants to bless us. He wants to reward us. We are blessed to be a blessing. When we operate within the golden rule, that is, doing for others what we want them to do for us, we shouldn't then be surprised if we too receive a blessing. When I was thinking of an example of this, I remembered an incident from many years ago. When John and I were first married, I was very shy, timid and lacking in confidence. My pastor at the time contacted me and asked me to visit a lady who had recently moved to the area. Now the thought of knocking on the door of a complete stranger filled me with dread. However, I knew that I would have appreciated a visit from a friendly face when I first moved to the area. So I gathered my courage together and knocked on her door. To cut a long story short, the Lord blessed me, because that lady became one of my closest and dearest friends. She also taught our daughter Hannah to play the piano, which has been such a blessing too, as Hannah now helps lead the worship at her church. John and I have been part of this fellowship for 3 years now, and we have been so blessed and see so many examples of agape love operating within the church. The welcome extended to all, the various groups from Community Cafe, Breakfast Church, Food Bank, Thursday Group, Love in a Box. The list goes on and on. So be encouraged, and let us all, and I'm speaking to myself too, seek to live and operate within a golden rule mentality and heart. Amen.